My name is Clara Bennett. I am 33, and for most of my life, I have been treated as the afterthought in my own family. At every holiday dinner, I was the one seated furthest from the laughter, the one whose voice never carried past the clinking of glasses. This Christmas was no different at first, until my parents smiled across the table and said I would be fine sleeping in the garage. My sister grinned, certain I would stay quiet like always. But what none of them knew was that I had been building something in silence for years, something powerful enough to turn their comfort into shock. Have you ever wondered how quickly the balance in a family can shift when the child they dismissed finally speaks the truth? Stay with me, because what happened that night is a story you will not forget. Let me take you back to where it began. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in a modest 2-story house on a quiet street where the neighbors knew each other's business before the morning paper arrived. My parents, Margaret and Thomas, were proud middle-class folks. My mother spent 3 decades teaching English at the local high school before retiring, and my father managed a regional bank branch until he took early retirement. They valued tradition, stability, and outward appearances more than anything else. For them, success meant Ivy League diplomas, prestigious jobs, and the kind of status that made people nod in approval at church on Sundays. My older sister Victoria was born to fit their mold. She had the perfect smile, the drive to lead, and the confidence that came from being constantly praised. She went on to Princeton for her MBA, and every decision my parents made seemed designed to clear her path. My younger brother Eric followed in those footsteps, studying finance and moving quickly at a respected accounting firm. At 29, he was already a junior partner. My parents introduced him with pride every time they met neighbors at the grocery store. And then there was me, the middle child, who never seemed to match their vision. From the time I was 10, I was fascinated by computers. While Victoria was busy with student council and homecoming dances, I was in the basement taking apart an old Dell my uncle had given me. I wanted to know why it worked, how it connected, how information moved through wires and circuits. My parents looked at me with concern, asking when I would join a proper club or pick up a more respectable hobby. My mother would sigh and remind me that colleges liked well-rounded students, not kids who hid away in their rooms. My father shook his head when I skipped the pep rally to attend a coding meetup. He thought I was wasting my time. The truth is, I was not wasting anything. I was building the only thing that ever made sense to me. Every line of code, every broken circuit board taught me something. My teachers saw potential and praised me for innovative thinking, but at home, I was the family disappointment. When Victoria won prom queen, my parents threw a small party. When my website won a regional prize, they barely mentioned it. That kind of dismissal cuts deep when you are 16. One memory still feels raw. I was in my junior year of high school, working on a coding project that won first place at a state competition. I came home clutching the ribbon and certificate, eager to tell my parents. Instead, I found them at the kitchen table, with Victoria discussing the cost of her college applications. They smiled warmly at her, proud and excited, while my achievements sat forgotten in my backpack. That night I realized, no matter what I did, I would never measure up to their golden girl. It got worse during my late teens. Victoria's future was so important to my parents that they made a choice that changed everything. My grandparents had left behind a small house upstate, a place filled with memories of summers by the lake. Instead of keeping it or dividing its value fairly, my parents sold it at a bargain price to fund Victoria's tuition and living expenses at Princeton. I remember the sting of hearing my father say it was the right investment because Victoria was destined for great things. To them, I was not worth the same sacrifice. I confronted them once about it, asking why they could not have supported me with even a fraction of what they gave her. My mother looked at me with tired eyes and said it was different. Victoria had a clear path while I jumped from project to project without finishing anything. My father added that I needed to prove I could follow through before anyone invested in me. I swallowed my anger and went back to my laptop, but that bitterness never left me. The neighbors noticed too. The Sanders family lived across the street, a nosy couple in their late 50s who always seemed to know what went on inside our house. They adored Victoria, constantly praising her looks and her leadership skills. With me, their comments were sharp. I still remember Mrs. Sanders laughing as she said I would never get far staring at a computer all day. My parents chuckled politely, not once defending me. That humiliation sat heavy in my chest, another reminder that in their eyes I was not enough. By the time I finished high school, I had stopped expecting their approval. I entered a local business school in Newark, mostly to quiet their worries, but my heart was never in it. I still worked on my side projects, building small apps and experimenting with security software late into the night. I knew I was chasing something bigger than grades and recognition. I was chasing freedom, the chance to prove myself without needing anyone's permission. Looking back, those early years shaped the woman I became. The disregard, the comparisons, the sacrifices made at my expense, all of it carved a fire in me that never went out. My family thought they were pushing me aside, but in reality they were pushing me toward my destiny. What none of them knew was that one day I would hold more power than they ever imagined, and the garage they laughed about would become the place where I finally decided to tell the truth. And this is where the story begins, the long road from forgotten middle child to the night when everything changed. High school only sharpened the gap between me and the rest of my family. While Victoria floated through the halls as student body president and homecoming queen, I spent my lunch breaks tucked away in the computer lab. The smell of old textbooks mixed with the hum of outdated machines was where I felt most alive. I started a coding club with 3 other kids who were just as socially invisible as I was. We built simple programs, debugged each other's projects, and shared vending machine snacks like it was currency. Teachers praised me for initiative, but at home, those achievements meant little. My mother often stood in the doorway when I was buried in code, arms folded, asking when I would try out for a normal activity. She would say that yearbook needed more writers, or that the debate team could use another sharp voice. I told her that I loved building things, that it was my way of being part of something. She shook her head, saying colleges wanted well-rounded kids, not loners who lived on keyboards. My father was harsher. When I abandoned a half-finished robot kit to build a small website for local babysitters, he muttered that I never saw things through. He told me to be more like Victoria, who finished every project with polish. The truth was that I did finish things, just not in the linear way they liked. Each project fed the next, teaching me something I carried forward. But trying to explain that to them felt like explaining color to people who only saw gray. They did not care about lines of code that made a clunky game run smoother or scripts that blocked spam. To them, those were distractions. To me, they were glimpses of who I could be. The comparisons wore me down. At the dinner table, my father would brag about Victoria's new volunteer initiative or Eric's math scores, and when conversation turned toward me, there was a pause. My mother would clear her throat and say, I was still figuring things out. The words stung more than they probably realized. They were meant as a soft landing, but instead, they felt like a label pinned to my chest. The forgotten one, the unfinished one. Sophomore year brought one of my earliest lessons in how deeply the hierarchy in our family ran. I came home excited one Friday, clutching a ribbon from a statewide coding competition where our small team had placed first. I rushed into the kitchen, ready to tell my parents. My mother was chopping vegetables while my father set the table. I began explaining, but Victoria walked in right then with news of her acceptance to a leadership conference. The energy shifted instantly. My parents beamed, glasses raised in a toast to her accomplishment. My ribbon remained in my hand unnoticed. I slipped it into my backpack later, too embarrassed to bring it up again. Eric, though younger, quickly learned how to play by their rules. He was practical, always thinking in numbers. When he got into the advanced math track, my parents celebrated with a special dinner. I congratulated him, and he shrugged, saying it was just the path that made sense. He did not rub it in, but his quiet success became another mirror reflecting my supposed failures. One night, he wandered into the basement where I was tinkering with a refurbished computer. He asked if I ever thought about doing something normal like student council. I said I was building tools that one day could be worth more than all of that. He laughed, not unkindly, but with the certainty of someone who thought I was dreaming too far. Neighbors echoed the same tune. The Sanders family across the street adored Victoria. They called her the star of the block, bragged about her Princeton prospects, and predicted great things. When it came to me, Mrs. Sanders once chuckled, saying at least every family needed a quiet one who stayed out of trouble. My parents smiled politely and never corrected her. That silence cut deeper than any insult. By junior year, I had founded the coding club officially and entered us in a state hackathon. We built a prototype that flagged suspicious network activity for schools, a simple but effective model. To my surprise, we won first place. Standing on the stage under fluorescent lights, I felt a surge of validation. The judges shook our hands, cameras clicked, and for once I believed I could bring this pride home. Yet when I placed the plaque on the mantel next to Victoria's trophies, my father barely glanced at it. That night over dinner conversation again circled around Victoria's latest leadership role. My mother asked Eric about his finance competition. No one asked me about the hackathon. I quietly moved the plaque into my room. Moments like those stacked up. Birthdays were another reminder. Victoria received jewelry, tailored blazers, and gifts that reflected her bright future. Eric got gadgets for his studies. I received gift cards as if no one knew what I liked. One year, my mother handed me a sweater 2 sizes too big, tags still dangling. She smiled, saying it looked practical. I thanked her, folded it away, and never wore it. The summer before senior year sealed the lesson. My grandparents had left behind a small house upstate, a cozy place with creaky floors and a porch that smelled of pine in the mornings. I loved that house. Loved the way it felt like a retreat from the weight of expectations. But my parents decided to sell it. They needed the funds, they said, for Victoria's tuition and living expenses. I argued, asking why we could not at least split the value, maybe invest a portion in my projects. My father dismissed me with a firm voice, saying investments went to those who proved themselves. My mother added that Victoria had a clear path and sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They did not see that the sacrifice was always me. That day, I walked out to the porch listening to the hum of cicadas and realized I was on my own. If I wanted a future, I would have to build it without their approval or support. No one was coming to recognize my late nights in the basement or my scribbled ideas in notebooks. The family script had no lines for me, so I would have to write my own. That decision hardened into resolve, one that carried me through the last year of high school with quiet determination. I kept attending competitions, tinkering with projects, and learning in silence. When Victoria gave her graduation speech, the crowd cheered, and my parents wept with pride. I stood in the back, clapping politely, already planning my escape. I knew then that the only way forward was to stop expecting them to see me. I would make myself undeniable someday, but until then, invisibility would have to be my armor. That realization shaped everything that came next, even when I did not yet know where the path would lead. For the first time, I understood the cost of being the forgotten child, and I accepted it. What I did not know was how much that cost would fuel me later when the time came to reveal what I had built. I enrolled at Rutgers in Newark that fall, choosing business administration because it sounded safe enough to calm my parents and broad enough to hide the truth. On the surface, I carried books and sat in lecture halls like every other student, but underneath, I was chasing something entirely different. Between classes, I scribbled ideas for a platform that could secure cloud accounts for small businesses. I stayed up late in my dorm with the glow of my laptop, painting the walls, testing bits of code that sometimes crashed everything and other times made my heart race with possibility. For a while, I managed to balance both lives. My parents called each week asking about grades, asking if I was networking, always mentioning how Victoria had thrived at Princeton. I answered politely, leaving out the details about the project that was consuming me. By sophomore year, the balance collapsed. I had built a prototype that actually worked. It flagged strange logins, notified users, and could be installed without a full IT team. A mentor from a summer program introduced me to an investor who wanted to talk. I sat across from him in a coffee shop with chipped mugs and explained my vision. He leaned back impressed and said he might be interested if I was serious enough to commit full-time. I went back to my dorm that night with my stomach in knots. School felt like a cage. I kept picturing the investor's eyes when he said the words full-time. I knew what it meant. I also knew what my parents would say. Still, I filled out the withdrawal form the next morning. Walking out of the registrar's office, I felt both terrified and free. Breaking the news at home was a storm. My father's face turned red as he slammed his hand on the dining table. He said I was wasting their money and disgracing the family. My mother sat rigid in her chair, her voice trembling as she asked how I could gamble my future like this. I told them I was building something real, something that already had interest. My father's voice cut like glass when he said, "Even if this little project works out, what kind of life will that be? No stability, no retirement, no benefits." He looked at me as if I had joined a cult. Victoria, visiting for the weekend, leaned against the doorway with her usual polished smirk. She said not everyone was built for success, that some people had to learn the hard way. Eric kept quiet, fiddling with his phone, his silence louder than any words. I walked out of that house with my backpack heavier than it had ever felt, not because of books, but because of the weight of their dismissal. I moved into a cramped studio in Jersey City. The rent was cheap because the heat clanked and the window frames whistled with every gust of wind. I bought a folding table from Goodwill and made it my desk. The walls were bare, but the air belonged to me. I worked days at a temp job filing invoices at a logistics office, then coded at night until my eyes burned. I named the company Nexora because it felt like a promise, like stepping into the next horizon. The first customer came almost by accident. A small medical practice in Hoboken needed better login security. I offered to install my tool for free. 2 weeks later, it flagged an attempt from an unknown device on a Sunday night. The office manager called me in a panic, then called me back later to say she finally felt safe. She insisted on paying something. When the check arrived, small as it was, I stared at it for a long time. It was proof. I pitched more, collected plenty of rejections, but each no taught me how to sharpen my story. A retired telecom executive I met at the library pulled me aside after a talk and asked to see my demo. He asked what I would do if 10 clients signed up at once. I told him I would automate onboarding and bring on help. He nodded, then a week later wrote me a personal check. That small angel investment kept me afloat long enough to approach real venture capital. When Harbor Point Ventures wired $2.5 million into the business account, I sat in front of the screen with tears in my eyes. My parents still thought I was struggling in some vague job hunt. Victoria was climbing corporate ladders at a marketing firm in Midtown, and Eric was already on track at his accounting firm. I chose not to tell them. Not yet. Family dinners became more painful as my company grew. One Thanksgiving, I tried to mention that I had hired 2 engineers and a designer. Before I could finish, Victoria announced her promotion to senior director. Glasses were raised, cheers filled the room, and my words evaporated. My mother clapped her hands and said how proud she was, while I sat there with mashed potatoes cooling on my plate. I decided then to stop seeking their approval. That night, as dishes clattered in the sink and the smell of pumpkin pie filled the house, I quietly vowed to myself I would keep building in silence. Let them think what they wanted. When the time came, the truth would not need defending. It would stand in front of them undeniable. In the weeks that followed, I doubled down on the company. We rented a small office in Midtown with second-hand desks and peeling carpet, but to me it felt like a palace. I gave my team health insurance, stocked the fridge with coffee and bagels, and told them we were not just building software. We were proving that even outsiders could change the rules. Still, every Sunday my phone buzzed with my mother's texts, asking if I had applied for steady jobs. My father left voicemails reminding me that stability mattered more than chasing whims. Victoria posted photos of herself in tailored suits at company events, with captions about leadership and vision. Eric updated his LinkedIn with new certifications. I scrolled past them all and returned to my code. The gap between us widened, but so did my determination. I had seen enough of their world to know it would never include me. So I built my own. And while they toasted Victoria's corner office and Eric's promotion, I sat in my rented space with the hum of servers around me, quietly preparing for the day I would no longer need to explain myself at all. Nexora grew in ways I had only dared to imagine when I was that girl coding alone in the basement. By the time we moved into a proper office near Bryant Park, the company had real clients, real revenue, and a rhythm that felt unstoppable. I kept my apartment in Jersey City and my old Honda Civic blending into the background when I visited home. Camouflage had become second nature. My family thought I was renting a shoebox and scraping by. The truth was that I had a penthouse waiting for me in Manhattan, but no one in Newark knew. I made a decision early on to stay out of the spotlight. When conferences asked for keynotes, I sent my COO Diana Cho, a brilliant strategist with the confidence I lacked. When journalists wanted to profile the founder, I let them focus on the product instead. Some thought I was a ghost, but anonymity gave me an edge. Competitors underestimated us. Investors speculated. I quietly steered the ship from behind the scenes, content to be invisible if it meant I could keep building in peace. The company expanded fast. Offices in San Francisco and Austin opened within 3 years. Our platform became the standard for small and mid-sized businesses that needed cloud security without the overhead. Larger corporations began knocking. I sat in boardrooms with people who never once suspected that the woman in jeans and sneakers taking notes was the one who wrote the first lines of code. I liked it that way. At home, the script had not changed. My mother asked me every call if I had thought about going back to school. My father reminded me that without a degree, doors would always close. I let them believe it. Sometimes their dismissal stung more than I admitted, but other times it felt like armor. If they saw me as a disappointment, then I owed them nothing. Victoria thrived at her marketing firm in Midtown. She drove a white BMW, wore dresses that cost more than my first month of rent, and posted endless updates about her glamorous life. My parents adored it. They introduced her to neighbors as their pride and joy. Eric followed steadily in accounting, moving up to junior partner. He rarely rubbed it in, but my parents did it for him, reciting his promotions like prayers. One Thanksgiving, I showed up in my Civic, wearing a sweater from Target, while Victoria pulled up in her BMW with her boss in tow. His name was Henry Wallace, a tall man with a Rolex that flashed in the dining room light. My parents welcomed him as though royalty had entered the house. I carried pies from the kitchen to the table while they toasted to Victoria's bright future. I tried to share that Nexora had just closed a deal in Europe, but my words were drowned out by clinking glasses and Henry's stories about expansion in Tokyo. I fell silent, carving turkey in the corner unnoticed. It was that night more than any other that taught me to stop volunteering my victories. If they did not ask, I would not tell. I poured myself into work instead. By the 5th year, Nexora had reached valuations that made the papers whisper. Still, I let Diana field questions. I was the ghost founder, the one nobody could pin down. The weight of secrecy grew heavier the higher we climbed. I told my team not to post photos with me tagged. I parked my Civic blocks away when I visited family. When I finally bought the Manhattan penthouse, I told my parents I had moved into a modest studio closer to work. I collected classic cars, but kept them hidden in a private garage. My life split cleanly into 2 halves, the family's version of me and the truth. There were nights when the double life gnawed at me. I would stand at the window of the penthouse, looking at the city stretching endlessly, and wonder how much longer I could keep it quiet. Yet every holiday reminded me why I did. Each gathering was a chorus of my mother praising Victoria's corner office, my father bragging about Eric's bonuses, and their pointed silence when it came to me. They did not want my truth. They wanted their version of me, the underachiever who might someday find a steady job. I let them keep that story. It gave me room to work without interference. But inside, the silence began to ache. I wanted someone to see me, really see me, not the mask I wore for survival. Then came the acquisition that changed everything. We had been in talks for months to purchase Orion Systems, a mid-sized tech firm that happened to employ Victoria as their marketing director. The irony hit me like a cold wave. For years, she had paraded Orion as proof of her success, bragged about her campaigns, her team, her influence, and now quietly Nexora was about to own it all. The deal papers arrived in my office 1 week before Christmas. The embossed logo of Orion sat beneath our own, stamped with the words, "A Nexora Company." I ran my fingers over it and let out a breath I had been holding for years. All those dinners where my family dismissed me, all the comparisons to Victoria, all the times they laughed about me chasing internet dreams. It had led to this moment. Diana asked if we should announce to Orion employees right away. I shook my head. Not until after the holidays. I wanted one last gathering with my family as they thought they knew me. One more chance to see their faces unguarded, to feel the weight of their assumptions before lifting the curtain. The invitation came, as always, through a short text from my mother. "Christmas Eve dinner at 6. Let us know if you're coming. No warmth, no excitement, just logistics." I typed back that I would be there, even as I did a plan formed in my mind. For years, I had lived split in two. This Christmas, in the same house where I had been dismissed, I would finally let the truth breathe. I would not raise my voice. I would not demand apologies. I would simply show them who I really was. The night was coming, and with it the reckoning I had been waiting for. December in Manhattan had its own kind of bite, the wind funneling down the avenues and tugging at coats like it wanted to strip people bare. I stood in the lobby of the Nexora Tower, the ink still drying on the acquisition papers, and felt the weight of everything pressing down and lifting at once. Orion Systems was ours. Victoria's company, her badge of honor, now sat under my control. I could hear Diana's voice echoing in my head, reminding me that employees needed clarity, that rumors spread fast, that timing mattered. But I told her to hold the announcement until after Christmas. At night, in my penthouse high above the city, I paced with a contract in my hands. The embossed logos glinted in the lamplight. This was the culmination of years of sacrifice nights, in cold apartments, meals of rice and beans, endless rejection, until someone finally believed. And yet, all I could think about was the text message from my mother. "Christmas Eve dinner at 6. Let us know if you're coming." No heart, no warmth, just an address and a time, as if I were a guest. I typed back yes. Then I put my phone face down and stared at the skyline. Part of me wanted to decline, to sit alone with a glass of wine and celebrate in my own quiet way. But the other part of me, the one that had been pushed aside at every family table, needed to walk into that house one more time, carrying the truth in my pocket. The week leading up to Christmas was a blur of board calls and planning meetings. My CFO Patrick sent urgent memos about integration, reminding me that Orion had contracts with sensitive government clients. Any disruption could cause panic. I approved retention packages, made notes on executive changes, and kept my voice steady on every call. But in the back of my mind, the image of my parents' dining room crept in. The long table set with china, the chandelier humming, my seat always at the far end. On the 23rd, Diana leaned across my desk and asked if I was sure about waiting. She said Henry Wallace, Orion's vice president of marketing, was already sniffing around about rumors of a sale. If word reached Victoria before the official announcement, the fallout could be messy. I told her I understood. I told her to trust me. She gave me a long look but didn't push further. The morning of Christmas Eve, I woke before dawn. Snow dusted the city, softening the sharp edges of skyscrapers. I made coffee, packed my laptop in its sleeve, and took the elevator to the garage. The Civic sat there, waiting, its paint dulled with age, the heater rattling when I turned the key. I could have taken one of the cars from my private collection, the Porsche or the Bentley, but the Civic had become my armor. It told a story my family wanted to believe, and I let them. The drive to Newark took less than an hour. Suburban streets were lined with twinkling lights, wreaths hung on doors, inflatable Santas bobbed in yards. I parked behind a black Jaguar I didn't recognize. When I stepped out, my breath rose in white puffs, my hands tightening around the handle of the pie I had bought on the way. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and pine. My mother bustled in the kitchen, her cheeks flushed, while my father poured drinks in the living room. And there she was, Victoria, in a red silk dress that shimmered under the lights, her arm hooked through Henry Wallace's. She looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Clara, you remember Henry," she said. "He's my boss at Orion." I shook his hand, noting the Rolex on his wrist, the practiced charm in his smile. He asked what I did these days, and before I could answer, Victoria laughed, lightly saying, "I dabbled in tech projects, nothing serious." My mother called me into the kitchen to help with vegetables, while Victoria and Henry joined my father by the fire. The laughter from the other room carried through the walls, a warm hum that excluded me. I chopped carrots in silence, my hands steady even as my stomach twisted. Later during dinner, the seating chart was as predictable as ever. Henry at the head, my father at the other, Victoria. To Henry's right, my mother; to his left, Eric beside her. My chair was at the far end, nearly out of sight. I sipped water, listening to my father ask Henry about Orion's expansion in Tokyo. Henry obliged, speaking with ease, while Victoria's hand rested casually on his arm. At one point, Henry mentioned the mysterious new CEO who had been making waves in the industry, someone no one had seen. My father leaned forward, curious. "Have you met him?" Henry shook his head. He said the man was like a ghost, powerful but invisible. Victoria chimed in, saying, "Some people prefer to stay in the shadows when they don't have the personality to lead from the front." I kept my eyes on my plate, biting back the smile that threatened to show. Then my father turned to me. "Clara, how's that little website you were working on? Any luck?" The little website had just acquired Orion Systems for $3.6 billion. I lifted my eyes and said evenly, "It's coming along." Victoria leaned across the table, her tone dripping with pity. "You know, Clara, there's an entry-level spot opening in marketing next quarter. Nothing fancy, but it might give you some real experience." I could put in a word. "Thanks, but I'm fine where I am," I replied. She shrugged, turning back to Henry, dismissing me. As the dishes were cleared, my parents spoke quietly about sleeping arrangements. Henry would take the guest room, of course, Victoria her old room, Eric his. My mother's voice brightened when she said she had set up the garage for me, a cot with blankets, just for one night. Victoria smirked behind her glass. The garage in December. The same garage where my father kept rusty tools and broken exercise equipment. I nodded, my face calm, though my hands tightened in my lap. After dessert, I stepped away to check my phone. An email from Patrick flashed across the screen, subject line urgent. He said the Orion deal was finalized, contracts executed, announcement ready. All he needed was my approval to push send. It was 8:30 on Christmas Eve. Victoria was in the living room refilling Henry's glass, my parents humming with contentment, Eric staring into his phone, and me, the disappointment, the afterthought, assigned to the garage like baggage. I slipped my laptop from its sleeve, the glow of the screen lighting my face. My finger hovered over the reply button. Years of humiliation pressed against this single decision. I thought of the plaque I once carried home, the sweater 2 sizes too big, the house they sold for Victoria's tuition. And I thought of the cot waiting for me in that freezing garage. My hands stilled on the keyboard. Maybe tonight was the night to stop hiding. I clicked open Patrick's message again, reading each line slowly, as if it could steady my breath. The Orion deal was sealed. All that was left was the timing of the announcement. I typed a short response, authorizing the release of internal memos immediately, not tomorrow morning as planned. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed send. Within minutes, a cascade of notifications began to buzz on my phone. Executives, managers, board members, all receiving the news that Nexora had acquired Orion. The garage door creaked open behind me. Cold air rushed in as Henry Wallace stepped inside, his brow furrowed. He looked almost apologetic. He said he wanted to make sure I was comfortable out here, that the temperature must be brutal. I forced a smile and told him I was used to it. Before he could say more, his phone vibrated sharply in his pocket. He frowned, pulling it out, and tapped the screen. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to shock, his eyes darting back and forth across the email. His jaw tightened and then his face drained of color. He muttered something about an urgent message from Orion's executive team. His phone chimed again and again, the sound of multiple notifications filling the cold air. He scrolled quickly, then froze. When his gaze lifted to me, recognition flickered like a light bulb struggling to turn on. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Are you—" He did not finish, but he did not need to. Before I could respond, his phone rang. The name on the screen was Patrick. He answered without thinking, his voice clipped. "Yes, I just saw the announcement. Yes, I am with someone right now." He stopped, his eyes locked on mine. Slowly, carefully, he said, "She's here." I held out my hand. "May I?" He passed me the phone with the stiffness of someone handing over a weapon. I lifted it to my ear, my voice steady in the way it always was when I wore my CEO skin. "Patrick, proceed with the full executive rollout tonight. The rest of the staff can be informed in the morning as planned." "Yes, I am fully aware of the timing. Do it now." Henry stared as I ended the call and handed the phone back to him. His breath misted in the icy air, his hand trembling slightly. "You're the one," he finally said. "You're Nexora. You bought Orion." I closed my laptop, slid it back into its case, and straightened my shoulders. "That's correct." The garage door opened again. Victoria appeared, her heels clicking against the concrete. She was holding her own phone, her face pale. "Henry, did you get these emails?" she began, but stopped when she saw his expression. Her eyes followed his gaze until they landed on me. Confusion, disbelief, and finally dread washed over her face. "What is going on?" "Maybe we should discuss this inside," I said, my voice even. "It's freezing out here." The three of us stepped back into the warmth of the house. My parents were still bustling around the kitchen, laughing softly, unaware of the storm about to break. Eric sat on the couch, his phone in hand. He looked up, puzzled by the tension on Victoria's face. "Mom, Dad," I said, firmly. "We need to talk." The shift in my tone made my mother turn dish towel in her hand. My father set down a platter. "What is it, Clara? You sound different." Henry's phone rang again, loud and insistent. Without thinking, he put it on speaker. The voice of Orion's CFO filled the room. "Henry, have you seen the announcement? Nexora has acquired us. It's effective immediately. The new CEO wants to address the leadership team tonight. The CEO is a woman. Her name is Clara Bennett." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents' eyes snapped to me. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, her face a mixture of shock and betrayal. Eric looked as though someone had slapped him. "It's true," I said quietly. "I founded Nexora, and as of today, Orion belongs to us." My mother dropped the towel, her hand covering her mouth. My father's face went slack, then hardened with disbelief. Eric blinked, shaking his head slowly. Victoria let out a sharp laugh that sounded more like panic. "That's not possible. You dropped out of college. You rent a shoebox. You drive that old Civic." I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened a secure dashboard app, and turned the screen toward them. Real-time data scrolled across it, employee counts, global servers contracts. Our valuation glowed at the top, a number in the billions. Their eyes locked on it, stunned. "I have hidden this from you for years," I continued. "I built it from nothing. I let you believe I was a failure because it was easier than trying to explain." My father's voice cracked, the words stumbling out. "You mean to tell me, all this time?" Victoria shook her head violently. No, you're lying. If you had that kind of power, you would have said something years ago." I met her eyes steadily. "And what would you have done, Victoria? Believed me? Or laughed the way you are laughing now?" Henry stood awkwardly near the doorway, caught between loyalty to his employee and recognition of the truth. His eyes flickered from me to Victoria, then back again. Eric finally spoke, his voice soft. "Clara, is this really true? You're the CEO." "Yes," I said, "and I am the one deciding Orion's future." The room spun with the weight of my words. My parents clung to the edges of the counter as though it were the only thing keeping them steady. Victoria's smirk had vanished, replaced by fear. Henry looked like a man who had stumbled into the wrong house at the wrong time. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For years I had sat at the end of this table, invisible. Tonight, every eye in the room was on me, and there was no going back. My father was the first to find his voice, though it shook as if the words resisted leaving his throat. "Clara, what on earth are you talking about? This Nexora thing, are you telling us you built that?" My mother clutched the back of a chair like it was the only thing holding her up. Her eyes darted between me and the glowing dashboard still open on my phone. I nodded once, calm and steady. "I am not asking you to believe me. The numbers are here. The acquisition went through tonight. Orion is now under Nexora." Victoria slammed her wineglass down on the table so hard the stem cracked. "You can't be serious. You expect me to believe that you, the sister, who barely finished a semester of college, the one who has never held a real job, somehow owns my company." "Your company?" I repeated softly. "Orion was never yours, Victoria. And as of tonight, it answers to me." The silence after those words felt like the moment before glass shatters. Henry shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His phone buzzed again, and he looked down as if praying for distraction. Eric rubbed his temples like he was trying to keep his head from splitting. My mother finally spoke, her voice pleading. "Clara, if this is true, why did you never tell us? All these years we thought you were struggling, we worried about you." I met her gaze without flinching. "You didn't worry. You dismissed me. Every holiday I sat at this table while you praised Victoria's promotions and Eric's bonuses. You laughed about me chasing internet dreams. Tonight you were about to send me to sleep in the garage while her boss took the guest room. Her face crumpled, shame flickering across it before she dropped her eyes. My father bristled, his pride still rising to fight. "Families make sacrifices, Clara. We sold the lake house to pay for Victoria's education because she had proven herself. You were always jumping from one thing to another. How are we supposed to know you were building something real?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to care. One question, one moment of curiosity would have been enough. Instead, you assumed I was a failure." Victoria let out a hollow laugh, her face pale. "So what now? You bought Orion, and suddenly I am supposed to call you boss." "That will be your choice," I answered. "Your role remains for now, but you will no longer report directly to Henry." Her eyes widened, panic mixing with rage. "You can't do this. You can't humiliate me in front of my own family." I tilted my head slightly. "Funny, that's exactly what you've been doing to me for years." Henry cleared his throat, finally speaking. "Clara, if I may." He sounded cautious, careful, like a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted. "I received the retention package. It was generous. Clearly you intend to keep Orion strong." "Yes," I said simply. "Orion's employees have nothing to fear. My issue is not with them." Eric spoke up then, his voice quieter than the rest. "Clara, I don't even know what to say. All this time I thought you were lost. I thought you were behind us." I looked at him, and for the first time that night my tone softened. "You weren't cruel, Eric. You just believed what everyone else told you." My mother stepped closer, her hands wringing the dish towel she had picked back up. "Clara, please. This family, we cannot let this break us. Tell us what we need to do." I felt the weight of her words, heavy with desperation. For years I had longed to hear them acknowledge me. Now, in the glow of an accidental revelation, they were begging for a way back. The old me might have rushed to comfort them, to soften the truth. But not tonight. I slipped my phone into my pocket, the dashboard disappearing into darkness, and drew a slow breath. "What you need to do," I said evenly, "is stop pretending I am the child you can belittle and ignore. That version of me no longer exists." The room fell into silence again. Snow tapped against the windows. The fire in the hearth popped and crackled, the only sound filling the air. My father sank into a chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. Victoria stared at her hands, the confidence that had once wrapped around her like armor crumbling piece by piece. I stood in the center of that room, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. For the first time in my life, every voice had fallen quiet, and mine was the only one that mattered. My father rubbed his forehead like he was trying to erase the last 5 minutes from his mind. He looked at me with tired eyes and said he never imagined this was what I had been doing all these years. My mother whispered that she had always prayed I would find stability, though she admitted she never pictured it like this. Their words reached me, but they sounded hollow, like they were grasping for a script they no longer believed. Victoria broke the silence next, her voice sharp. So what does this mean for me, Clara? Do you expect me to walk into Orion next month and pretend nothing has changed? Do you expect me to answer to you? Her eyes locked on mine, and I felt every ounce of the resentment she had carried since we were children. I told her her position was safe if she wanted it, but her reporting line would change. She would no longer control the narrative she had clung to for so long. Her mouth twisted, and for a moment I thought she might throw her glass across the room. Instead, she sat back, folding her arms, muttering that it was humiliating. Henry tried to smooth things over, his voice low. Clara, the truth is out now, and it is better we hear it from you. The transition will be easier if everyone accepts reality. He looked at Victoria as he said it, and her cheeks burned red. Eric cleared his throat, his words careful. I think the hardest part is realizing how blind we've been. I never asked about your work, Clara. I never thought to. I just assumed. That stung more than I expected. I told him he wasn't alone. None of them had asked. Not once in 5 years. The tension thickened until my father broke it with a sigh that sounded like surrender. You have proved us wrong. We see that now. But families should stay together. We can make this right. Make it right, I repeated, letting the words settle in the room. How do you make up for years of telling someone they were less than their siblings? How do you undo sending your daughter to sleep in a freezing garage while you gave her sister's boss the guest room? My mother's face turned pale. She stammered, saying she hadn't meant it that way, that it was just for one night, that she thought I wouldn't mind. The excuses fell flat. I told her what mattered wasn't the cot or the cold, it was the message. That I was expendable even in my own home. Victoria leaned forward, her tone biting. Stop playing the victim. You chose to keep this secret. You wanted us to look foolish. I held her gaze without flinching. No, I wanted you to care without needing proof. That is what never happened. The room felt heavy with unspoken truths. My parents avoided my eyes. Eric shifted uncomfortably. Henry stood frozen, perhaps regretting that he had accepted the invitation at all. Then Eric surprised me. He asked about the work, about what Nexora actually did. His question broke the cycle of accusations, and for the first time that evening I allowed myself to explain. I told them about the platform, about securing data for companies that could never afford big IT departments, about protecting small clinics and schools from breaches. As I spoke, I saw something flicker across his face, something like respect. Victoria rolled her eyes, but she stayed silent. My father leaned back, listening more intently than I had expected. My mother fidgeted, torn between pride and guilt. When I finished, the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, filled with the weight of realization. My father finally said that he wished he had known, that he could have helped somehow. I reminded him gently that he never asked to. He looked down at his hands, unable to argue. The clock on the mantel chimed 9. Outside, snow began to fall harder, tapping against the windows. The fire in the hearth popped, filling the void left by words no one could find. Victoria stood abruptly, muttering that she needed air. She walked out the back door into the yard, her heels crunching against the snow. I hesitated before following the cold wrapping around me as I stepped outside. She stood by the fence, arms wrapped tight around herself, breath rising in clouds. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Was this your plan all along, Clara? To wait until the perfect moment to humiliate me? I told her no. My plan had been to keep building, to keep quiet. Tonight only changed because she and my parents tried to put me in that garage. She turned her face toward me, then her eyes wet. I've been cruel to you, she said, her voice breaking. Maybe I thought if I kept you down I'd stay on top. Now you're my boss. I said softly that she didn't have to see it that way. Her work was good and the company needed it. Our relationship could change if she wanted it to. She laughed bitterly, saying she wasn't sure she even knew how to stop competing. The snow settled on her hair, catching the porch light. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as the rival who always won, but as a woman who feared losing everything she had built her identity on. I left her there in the quiet yard, unsure if anything I said had reached her. Inside, my parents hovered near the fire, whispering. Eric gave me a long look, one that felt different from before. He didn't say anything, but his eyes carried something like apology. I picked up my laptop bag from the garage when no one was watching. The cot sat in the corner, blankets piled carelessly. I looked at it one last time, then turned out the light. When I walked back inside, the house was strangely still. The night wasn't over, but I knew nothing would ever return to the way it had been. Eric was the first to break the stillness, his voice careful but clear. Clara, what happens next? With Orion, I mean. Do people lose their jobs? He looked at me with the kind of seriousness I had never seen from him before, like he suddenly understood I held the weight of more than just family pride. I told him most employees would stay. The acquisition was about strength, not cuts. But the leadership structure would change, and people like Henry would answer differently now. Henry shifted in his chair, uneasy, but said nothing. My father leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at the rug as though it could explain the world. So you are their boss now. Victoria's boss, Henry's boss. My God. His tone carried disbelief and something else, a trembling edge of fear. My mother's eyes were wet. Clara, why didn't you let us in? We could have supported you, celebrated you. I shook my head slowly. You never asked. That silence was louder than any words. Victoria came back inside, snowflakes melting on her shoulders. She looked older in that moment, her confidence frayed. She sat down without meeting anyone's eyes. For years she had commanded every room. Tonight she could barely hold herself upright. The fire snapped, filling the silence. Then Henry finally spoke. Clara, I need to say something. He cleared his throat. I did not know. If I had, I would have treated you very differently. That sentence told me everything. They only saw value when power was undeniable. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face calm. Eric shifted again. Clara, do you remember a few years ago when I asked for a loan? My parents turned sharply toward him, surprise etched across their faces. He glanced at them, then back at me. That money, it was you, wasn't it? I nodded once. He exhaled, running a hand over his face. I never knew. I thought it came from some anonymous fund. You kept me afloat when no one else could. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Clara, you never told us that. I didn't need to, I said softly. He needed help. I could give it. That was enough. Eric's eyes shone with something like gratitude and guilt mixed together. You saved me, Clara, and I never even said thank you. The tension in the room cracked a little. My father swallowed hard, his voice low. We've been blind. Utterly blind. But Victoria wasn't ready to yield. She sat up, her face sharp again. This changes nothing, she said. You think money and titles can erase the years of mistakes you made, the years you wasted. Her words hit like cold steel, but they no longer pierced the way they once had. I met her eyes evenly. The difference is, Victoria, I learned from what you called mistakes. Every so-called failure became the foundation of something bigger. That is why I stand here, and you sit there doubting. Her lips pressed into a thin line. My parents shifted, uncomfortably torn between daughters. Henry's phone rang again. He excused himself to the hallway, his voice muffled but tense as he spoke to someone from Orion. I caught fragments, words like restructuring and leadership call. Each one confirmed the shift had already begun. The weight of the night pressed heavier as the minutes ticked by. My mother finally whispered, Clara, we were wrong. All these years we measured worth in degrees and promotions. We should have seen you. We should have asked. Her words trembled, but I could not let them undo everything. I told her it was too late for recognition to erase the past. What mattered now was how they treated me from this day forward. My father's voice cracked when he asked, What do we do, Clara? Tell us. We don't want to lose you. The irony struck me. For years I had been invisible. Now they were begging not to lose me. Eric looked down at his hands, then back at me. Maybe this is a chance, he said quietly. A chance for us to start over if you want that. I felt something loosen in my chest, but I didn't answer right away. The night was not about forgiveness yet. It was about truth. Victoria pushed back her chair abruptly, the legs scraping against the floor. "I need air again," she muttered and stormed out. My mother started to rise, but I held up a hand. "Let her go." Henry returned, then his face drawn. "The board wants an emergency call first thing in the morning. They want you, Clara." All eyes turned to me again. I felt the shift fully then, the final crack in the old order. I was no longer the disappointment they whispered about. I was the center of every plan, every fear, every plea. The fire dimmed, casting long shadows across the room. I sat back, my hands folded in my lap, and let the silence stretch. For the first time, they were waiting on me. My father finally spoke, his voice low, and stripped of its usual authority. "Clara, we made mistakes. Too many to count. But please help us understand what this means for us, for this family." His hands trembled as he clasped them together, something I had never seen from him before. My mother's eyes searched mine, wet and pleading. "We never wanted to hurt you. We thought we were guiding you. We thought we were protecting you from yourself." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "Instead, we lost sight of you completely." I looked at both of them, remembering years of being told I was less than, the way every holiday ended with me shrinking into silence while they toasted to Victoria and Eric. Tonight was different. Tonight they sat waiting, vulnerable, their confidence cracked. I spoke slowly, making sure each word carried. "What this means is that the way you treated me is no longer possible. I will not accept being dismissed, ignored, or mocked. I don't care if you are my parents or not." My father's shoulders sagged and he nodded once. "You're right." His voice was hoarse. "We wronged you. Tell us how to fix it." Victoria had returned quietly, standing by the doorway, her arms crossed. Her face was tight, but there was no fight left in her tone when she said, "So you're really keeping me on? After everything?" "Your work is good," I answered. "Whatever our history, Nexora needs effective people. But you will be accountable just like anyone else." She scoffed lightly, but her voice shook. "You could destroy me if you wanted." I met her eyes without blinking. "I don't need to destroy you, Victoria. You've already done enough of that yourself." Her eyes flickered with something unsteady, shame mixed with fear. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Eric leaned forward, his tone soft. "Clara, I meant what I said earlier. Maybe this is a chance to start over, not just with you, but for all of us." I felt a strange heat rise in my chest, not anger, but something close to release. Maybe. But starting over doesn't erase the past. My mother stepped closer, her voice rising. "Clara, please. We will do whatever it takes. Just don't shut us out completely." I thought about the garage, the cot, the blankets tossed together like I was nothing more than an afterthought. I thought about every time I had walked into this house and left feeling smaller. And now here they were asking not to be left behind. The shift was almost too much to process. My father, once towering in judgment, now sat hunched, his pride broken. My mother, who had laughed at Victoria's jokes about my so-called little projects, now begged me with her eyes. Victoria, who had smirked at my seat at the far end of the table, now twisted her hands like a woman afraid of losing her grip. I straightened my back, letting the weight of silence stretch again. "You're asking me to forget years of being treated as though I didn't matter. That's not possible. But what you can do now is decide if you're willing to treat me as I deserve going forward." My father's voice cracked as he said, "We will. We promise." Victoria spoke again, her tone unsteady. "Clara, if the truth comes out at Orion, if people find out you're my sister, it will ruin me. They will think I only got where I am because of you." The irony almost made me laugh. For years she had thrived on being the golden child, certain she had earned every accolade. Now she feared being diminished by my shadow. I told her the choice was hers. She could reveal it or keep it private, but she no longer had control over me either way. Henry cleared his throat, his presence almost forgotten. "Clara, the board call is at 7 in the morning. You'll need to be ready." He looked at me with something like respect but also fear. He had walked into this house thinking he was the most important man in the room. Now he knew otherwise. I nodded, thanking him for reminding me. The fire had burned low embers, glowing faintly. Snow pressed heavy against the windows, muffling the world outside. Inside, the balance had shifted entirely. My father finally stood slower than usual, his frame stooped. Clara, you'll stay in the guest room tonight. Not the garage. Never again. His voice shook, and I almost believed he meant it. I looked at the hallway at the closed door of the guest room where Henry's bag already sat. My mother rushed to add that Henry could take the couch or even the garage anywhere else. I glanced at Henry, who paled. I told them calmly, no one should sleep in that garage. Not me, not Henry, not anyone. Victoria's eyes flickered, guilt pressing down. It was my idea, she admitted suddenly, her voice cracking. I thought it would be funny. I thought it would make you feel small. You succeeded, I said quietly. But only for a moment. Her face crumpled and she turned away. The night wound down with half-hearted attempts at small talk, no one really knowing what to say. My parents moved like ghosts through their own kitchen, their certainty stripped away. Eric kept looking at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. Henry stayed mostly silent, answering emails from Orion, his expression grim. When I finally stood to leave the living room, my father asked if I needed anything, if there was something they could do. I shook my head. I climbed the stairs, slowly, hearing the hushed voices behind me, my name whispered in tones I had never heard before. Reverence, fear, desperation. The guest room door creaked as I opened it. Fresh sheets, neatly folded towels, and the faint scent of lavender. For the first time in this house, I was being given more than scraps. I set my bag down on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet, but my mind buzzed with everything that had shifted. Tomorrow would bring questions, announcements, and consequences far beyond these walls. Tonight, though, I let myself sink into the silence of that room, knowing the garage sat empty and cold below me, a relic of who I used to be. The morning light seeped through the curtains, soft and pale against the lavender walls. I woke before anyone else, my body still wired from the weight of the night before. Downstairs, the house was quiet, only the faint hum of the furnace breaking the silence. I slipped into the hallway with my laptop under my arm, knowing the call with Orion's board would not wait for family drama to resolve itself. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee, the smell filling the air, with a comfort that felt foreign in this house. My father appeared minutes later, his robe pulled tight, his eyes still heavy with lack of sleep. He paused when he saw me at the table, the laptop open, documents glowing on the screen. Clara, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. Do you need privacy? No, I answered. I'm used to working anywhere. He nodded, fumbling for a mug, trying to look useful in a room where he had never cooked a meal in his life. His eyes flicked to the screen, to the financial charts and emails, and for the first time in years, I saw curiosity instead of dismissal. By the time the call started at 7, Henry had joined, pale and tense, standing in the corner like a man awaiting judgment. Victoria appeared too, her makeup done, but her eyes swollen, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Eric lingered in the doorway watching. My parents hovered near the counter, silent. Voices filled the laptop speaker, Orion executives, demanding answers, their panic sharp. They asked if layoffs were coming, if contracts were safe, if leadership would be gutted. I spoke with steady precision, assuring them their work was valued, that Nexora was investing for growth, not collapse. The words came easily honed from years of negotiation. At one point, a lawyer raised the lawsuit. Orion had been facing a data breach that had been buried from public view. I confirmed we had reviewed it, and corrective measures were already underway. The room around me shifted when I said it. Victoria's eyes widened, fear flashing. She knew more than she wanted to admit. After the call ended, the house fell silent again. Henry excused himself quickly, claiming he needed to answer emails. Victoria stayed rooted, her face pale. Clara, that lawsuit, she whispered. You knew about it. Of course, I replied. It was one of the reasons Nexora acquired Orion. To fix what others tried to hide. Her lips parted and I saw guilt wash over her. I knew then she had been part of the cover, spinning the story to clients, protecting her bosses. She closed her eyes, whispering, They'll pin it on me. I didn't respond. The truth had a way of finding its mark. Eric finally spoke. Clara, did you know about the house? I frowned, confused. What house? He glanced at our parents, who shifted uneasily. Dad sold the lake house for pennies years ago to help pay for Victoria's tuition and her apartment in Manhattan. The admission hung heavy in the air. My mother stared at the floor. We thought it was the right choice, she murmured. Victoria had promised. I swallowed hard. That house was my childhood summers on the dock, winters by the fire. You sold it to finance her life while mocking mine. My father's face flushed, shame and defensiveness clashing. We did what we thought was best. Best for her, I corrected. Not for me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My parents sank into chairs, suddenly smaller. Eric stood straighter, his voice steadier than I expected. Clara helped me when no one else would. She kept me from drowning in debt. You never even asked how I managed to stay afloat. You just assumed. My father tried to speak, but Eric cut him off. You always assumed she was failing. You never gave her the chance to show you who she was. The words landed harder than anything I had said. My parents sat in silence, their pride unraveling. The doorbell rang, startling everyone. My mother rushed to answer, and I heard voices from the porch. Neighbors, their tones curious, their words sharp. Did you see the news? Orion has been bought. Some mysterious CEO. It's her, isn't it? They stepped inside before my mother could stop them, their eyes flicking from me to Victoria, their whispers filling the space. The humiliation on my parents' faces was almost too much to watch. For years they had boasted about their golden daughter, and now the truth stood in front of them, undeniable. One neighbor clucked her tongue. All this time and you never said a word. We thought Clara was the one who never amounted to much. My mother flushed, stammering, trying to salvage dignity. I sat calmly at the table, sipping my coffee. I didn't need to explain. The truth had already spread beyond these walls, and their laughter, their whispers, their judgment had all turned to silence. Eventually, the neighbors left, leaving behind the sting of exposure. My parents sank deeper into their chairs, their faces gray. Victoria stared at her phone, no doubt calculating how quickly the news would reach her colleagues. Eric looked at me, his voice quiet but certain. They'll never see you the same way again. I met his gaze. That's the point. The clock ticked louder in the quiet that followed. The storm outside pressed against the windows, but the real storm had already broken inside these walls. By the time breakfast was on the table the next morning, the mood in the house had shifted into something fragile and uncertain. My mother set out French toast and fruit with an effort to appear normal, but her hands trembled as she poured the coffee. My father barely looked up from his cup, his jaw tight, his eyes carrying the weight of the night before. Eric joined us quietly, his phone tucked away, his expression steady. He gave me a small nod, as if to remind me that I was no longer alone in this family, not completely. Victoria entered last, her face pale under her makeup, her shoulders drawn in. She sat across from me, her fork scraping against her plate, but she barely ate. The television in the corner was on low, and the news ticker rolled across the screen. Nexora acquires Orion Systems. Sources say the deal makes Nexora one of the fastest-growing firms in the country. The anchor's voice spoke about the mysterious founder finally being named publicly. My photo, taken at a conference years earlier, though never identified until now, filled the screen for a moment. My parents froze. They had nowhere to hide. Their friends, their neighbors, the community that had always been their audience now, knew the truth they had ignored for years. My father cleared his throat, his voice gravelly. Clara, we should have been there for you. We failed you. Those words hung heavy, late but undeniable. I didn't rush to comfort him. I simply nodded. You did. But today isn't about fixing yesterday. It's about how you treat me from this day forward. Victoria finally spoke, her voice breaking. They will know I am your sister. At Orion, at every client meeting. They will whisper that I only made it because of you. I looked at her calmly. That is your choice. You can let it define you, or you can prove yourself. No one else can do that for you. She dropped her eyes, silent, the weight of reality pressing her down. The rest of breakfast passed in quiet. My parents asked small questions about Nexora, as if they were trying to reclaim some role in my life. I answered briefly, but didn't give more than I wanted. They had not earned access to every part of me. Not yet. When it was time to leave, I gathered my bag and coat. My mother rushed to press a small box into my hand. Inside was a silver frame holding the magazine article they had once ignored, now signed with a clumsy note from both of them. A peace offering, awkward but sincere. I accepted it with a nod, not with forgiveness, but with acknowledgement. On the porch, the cold air hit my face clean and sharp. Neighbors were outside shoveling snow, their glances lingering, their whispers unmistakable. For once I did not shrink under them. Let them see. Let them know. Eric walked me to the car, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Clara, thank you again for what you did for me. I want to do better as a brother." I believed him. His eyes carried no arrogance, no envy, just honesty. I told him we would see what the future held. He nodded, and that was enough. I slid behind the wheel of the Civic, the same car that had carried me through years of pretending to be small. As I turned the key, I realized I no longer needed it as armor. The truth was out, and nothing could make me invisible again. Back in Manhattan, the Nexora Tower gleamed under the winter sun, its glass reflecting the sky. Inside, my team was waiting, ready to move forward with integration. The board wanted answers, the press wanted statements, employees wanted reassurance. And for the first time, I felt the freedom of not hiding any part of myself. That night, as I stood by the window of my penthouse overlooking the city, I thought of the garage. The cot, the blankets, the cold air that bit into my skin. It had been a symbol of dismissal, of exile within my own family. Now it was nothing more than a memory, a shadow of a role I no longer played. The reckoning had come not with screaming or vengeance, but with truth. Truth that turned humiliation into power, silence into recognition. My family would never see me the same way again. And that was exactly as it should be. If you have ever carried a secret waiting for the right moment to be seen, you know the weight it brings. Tell me, what moment in your life would you choose to reveal everything? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength where no one expected it.